So we're going to start with English Language Paper 1, Section B, which is the autobiographical writing or creative writing. The best way to success is to write autobiographically as if you were there in the story. And I've developed 5 steps. If you follow them carefully, then you'll produce an acceptable, realistic, and more importantly, suitable piece of writing for the exam. For Paper 1, Section B, there are 40 marks available, but the tricky thing is that 16 of those 40 marks are awarded for spelling, grammar, and punctuation. If you look back at this PowerPoint where we went through all of those issues, you'll know what kind of thing to look for. The exam board recommend that you spend about 45 minutes on this section. You do get a choice, so you'll get a picture prompt plus a title, or you'll just get a writing title. So it's up to you which you choose. To start with, we have to master the technique that's known as show, not tell. And basically, that technique involves using your senses and movement to reveal the events of the story. The second important thing is that you only write about a very short unit of time, and then you can infill any other details as you go along. If you look on this slide, there's the exam question, and we're going to use this one with the photo prompt to develop autobiographical writing. The best structure to use is a 5-step structure, and the steps are all laid out on this slide. You can see that step 1 is where you start the story and make the reader curious. Step 2, you set the scene and reveal the time of day, year, the place that everything takes place, and so on. And in step 3, you introduce a problem. Now, the problem is just the situation to keep the reader interested. In step 4, the situation is resolved and the outcome is hopefully positive. And then last of all, in step 5, you echo something from the start of your story. The opening few sentences of your writing should always make the reader curious, where you hint at something quite dramatic, but you don't actually say what that's going to be. This has the effect of intriguing the readers, and therefore they're encouraged to read on and find out what's going to happen. It also gives your writing tension and structure. If you look at the examples in the blue boxes, there's 3 that would work for many examples of autobiographical writing. And for all of them, we never quite get to know the details. So if you look at the first one, we've got the chance to do something special, but we don't know what that something special is. We also know it's something quite significant because the writing implies that if you don't take the chance, then you're going to be filled with regret. The second one talks about this moment, but doesn't tell you what this moment is all about. And it goes on to show all the sacrifices that the writer has made for this moment. And we get the sense of immediacy with the phrase, the next couple of hours. And lastly, the day had come. What day? It leaves the reader asking questions. And then we get the dramatic indicator of dreams being either realized or crushed. All 3 of these will work well, as I've said, with many titles, and they will all intrigue the reader. Connected with the picture prompt is the title, Write About a Time When You or Someone You Know Had to Work Hard on Something. Now, if you look at the picture, it is a picture of a football changing room. So we can start with that particular point. If you look at the slide here, I've given an example of writing in the tell technique, and you can see it's very short, there's no senses and no movement included. If you look at the show technique, then that varies quite considerably. We've got a comment on how the air felt in the changing room, that your character or you are glancing around and we notice what you see. We're commenting on how everybody is concentrating, and then we introduce the hook. Our biggest challenge was only minutes away, and this will engage the reader and make them want to know what happens next. So once you've interested the reader and commented directly on the picture prompt in just a few sentences, the next stage is to set the scene and give the reader the smaller details of the time of day, the place, the time of year, and so on. You can see from the two examples the difference between something written in the tell manner and something written in the manner of show. With tell, it's very simple, very short. With show, we've got a lot more detail, we've got a lot more movement, and we've got many more of the senses hinted at. So, for example, if you look at the show passage, the hint of frost is in the air, suggesting cold, and spring is suggested by the trees just being in their first leaf. We know the time by listening to the church clock chiming, and then we also get the sound of the car doors banging as the boys arrive for the football match. After that, we have you as the main character looking around to describe what you see. So here we've got the freshly painted entrance sign. We've got the empty goal nets on the pitch, and the stark white lines had been freshly painted. So we've looked at step 1, which engages the reader, makes them curious about what's going to happen, and then moving to step 2, where you set the scene, you indicate the time of day, the time of year, and where the event is going to take place that you're writing about. And in step 3 here, we progress this a little bit further. But notice, in the tell section, it's all statements. In the show section, there's a lot more movement as you push against the heavy door. There's an awareness of the smell of the room. There's a bit of conversation between you and your friend, which brings everything to life. And then there's a description of how you move within the room, how you put your bag down, how you put your kit on, and then how the coach speaks to you. And all of this adds to the reality of the situation and moves the writing forwards. So what we've done in the last section is progress the action of the story by using movement and speech, not too much, but enough to create a sense of identity. The reader can also visualize the scene by what you've said about how you change and the smells and the sounds that are going on. You can't do a lot more than that in the time you've got in the exam, so we have to keep moving forwards. And if you look at the bullet points on this slide, you can see that there's some things that you might include as you move forwards. Not all of them, but you can make a choice. So for instance, you could describe how the team are warming up, or how you go out and look at the competition. Maybe there's some rivalry, maybe there's a bit of name calling, or competitive language between the teams. Maybe the match doesn't go your way by the end of the first half. Now, if you do this, it keeps the tension going and the reader interested to see what will happen. It also lets you, when you're moving on to the last section, realistically describe how you're all working harder which remember is a reference to the exam question, and you're working harder to achieve a good result for your team. So we've engaged the reader, we've set the scene, and we've got the next section of the writing underway where you start working hard at winning the football match. We've kept some tension going so that it's not an easy victory, and that leads you quite nicely to the fourth section of your writing where you resolve, in inverted commas, the situation, and we turn it round so that you do achieve a successful ending. It's always nice to end a story on a high note, and much easier to write about than you losing and feeling dreadful. And if you look at the writing on this slide, again, there's some ideas about what sort of items you might include. You could go back with your heads held high on the second half. What are the spectators doing? You might spot a relative, your dad or somebody, and not a nod and acknowledgement of him coming to watch you. There might be a couple of near misses, which again keeps the tension going, and so on. If you read those down, you'll see there's all sorts of other things where you could progress this story. When you have done this section, you've won the match, we need to go back to the fifth step. And the fifth step is simply an echo of your opening lines. And if you look here, I've put, back in the stuffy changing room, we didn't notice the heat. We haven't said exactly the same as at the start, but we've echoed it in some way. Here's that 5-point structure that I've mentioned throughout the PowerPoint, set out as a flowchart. If we start at the top and move round clockwise, you will see that I've indicated the steps, plus a guide about how much you should be writing. That way you can check whether you're on track, whether you've spent too much time on one section or not enough, and so on. So let's look at the top. Start the story using the picture, which helps you to focus. In this case, we started the story in the changing room. The second step, revealing the time of year, the day, the setting, and so on, about 6 to 7 lines. The third and fourth steps are the biggest sections of writing, where you write about 3/4 of a page for each one. And I've called the third step developing the problem in inverted commas. The problem here for you in this situation is how you're going to win the match. In the second of the 3/4 of a page pieces of writing takes you to the fourth step, and you turn your problem into a solution or a resolution of the story. So we turn our difficulties, you working hard at winning the match, into a positive outcome. And then last of all, moving further around the clock face, we echo something from the start of your writing. It doesn't have to be all of it, but as long as some of the words or phrases, or in this case the place, is re-mentioned, it gives a nice structure to your writing, and it looks like you've got a very well-structured piece of autobiographical writing.